So now we know what it means to translate ordinary arguments, ordinary language, into categorical form. But sometimes it's not as obvious, okay? Sometimes human speech is, well, it's just a little bit different. And especially when we use some pronouns, especially when nouns that might not be immediately clear whether they are universal or particular. And so that's what we want to look at today. We want to look at what it means to translate ordinary language into categorical form when you have some of those particular or rather odd instances. So we start off with our little kangaroo here in green, and kangaroo says, kangaroos can hop really well, and since I'm a kangaroo, what can you conclude about me? And Logic Dragon is thinking, well, other than the fact that you're green, I can't conclude anything. I wonder if the humans can help. So here comes our little logic teacher, and she says, let's start by finding the propositions. Remember, that's the first step. Since we don't know the conclusion yet, we will only look for the two propositions that can be premises. And so she writes it up on the chalkboard here. Kangaroos can hop really well, and since I am a kangaroo, what can you conclude about me? So that's the regular language, and we want to see if we can pull that out into categorical form. So Logic Student in blue says the two propositions are kangaroos can hop really well and I am a kangaroo. Right? Those are the two basic things that are being stated here. And the Logic Student in green says, what would they look like in a categorical form with a subject term, a copula, and a predicate term? Remember, that's the next step after we have the basic propositions, is to put them into categorical form. So Logic Student in green says, well, the first proposition needs to be tweaked just a little, right? Kangaroos can hop really well. Gets restated, kangaroos are animals that can hop really well. And it's not a whole lot different, but we had to get it in that form so we could get that copula, right? The linking verb are in there. And we introduced the word animals just so that the sentence would work. Kangaroos are animals that can hop really well. But he notices the second, he says, is already in categorical form. I am a kangaroo, right? So that one's already there. You've got your subject term I, you've got your copula am, and then you've got kangaroo. And then the logic teacher comes back and says, what quality, affirmative or negative, and what quantity, universal or particular, do you think these are? Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. All right, I think we could agree that for quality, both of the propositions are affirmative, right? They both seem to be stating something positive. They are affirming something. And the proposition that talks about kangaroos seems to be implying all kangaroos. That would be universal. But what about the I statement? Is that particular? I is one individual, in this case kangaroo, or is I universal? Well, as it turns out, I is universal. I is the complete category of I. And I actually want to look at an illustration here to help you understand that. So here's a picture of my son, Austin, who's a former TMS student, and me. We are at a Christian rock festival. And here I am saying, I am Mr. Perkins, right? Obviously, there's only one Mr. Perkins in this picture. I am that guy. Now, notice in this, I've basically taken me out of the picture, right? And we've got this red line around where I would be, right? That's the container, if you will. Just think about that as the Mr. Perkins container, right? Then here I come, we're going to put me back into that container. All right, we're going to fill up that container with all that is Mr. Perkins. And as you see in this last picture, there's only one thing that fills all of that container, and that is I. That is Mr. Perkins. So I hope that illustration kind of made some sense to you. When you think about I, you just need to think about the container of I, right? And what fills that? Well, there's one thing, but it fills all of the container, just like my picture filled all of that red boundary, okay? So because everything is filled in that container, in that category, I would actually be a universal category. So now our logic student in blue can say both propositions are universal affirmative. Right? Kangaroos are animals that can hop really well, talking about all kangaroos, and it is affirming something, universal affirmative. I am a kangaroo. As we just saw, I is a universal, and again, the statement is affirming something, so universal affirmative. And then the logic teacher says, now we just need to add the proper quantifiers and we will be ready to draw our conclusion. Now here's where it does get a little strange sounding. All right, so we have the all kangaroos are animals that can hop really well. We've already got the all there. That's our quantifier. That's good. And then the last one, all I is a kangaroo. Now that sounds really, really strange. And even Logic Dragon says, I can't help it if this sounds awkward. That's what you get for speaking English. And I know that absolutely violates the rules of grammar that you know, but what you want to think about in the logic statement here, this proposition, is that I is simply a category. It would be like saying all kangaroos are, okay? So all I is a kangaroo, right? So the I is just this single category, but it is a universal. That's why the all. Since it's a single category, we're using the copula is, even though that sounds really strange. And then the teacher says the conclusion is all I, right, all that category is an animal that can hop really well. The little kangaroo comes back and says, or as normal kangaroos would put it, kangaroos can hop really well, and since I am a kangaroo, I can hop really well. So the main thing you want to think about is when you're looking at a noun, are we talking about the complete category or only some of that category? And even though that may put us into some strange grammar when it comes to the propositions, kind of pull yourself back from that. In terms of analysis, we want to get it into that good categorical form. Then we can always translate it back into normal speech or normal kangaroo speech, as the case may be.